Hi and welcome to HD Morf, the channel dedicated to the source of the mechanical knowledge of human design. In this series we will delve into the depths of the individual lines for each or the 64 gates of the Rave I Ching as described by Ra Uru Hu. The structure of every video contains general information about the gate as well as details for each line. Each gate represents a separate hexagram. We will start with a description of the hexagram line structure and the detailed meaning of the third line, followed by the general description of Gate 41 and its third line. If you are already familiar with some of the information, skip to the next relevant section. For convenience we have split the video into sections, which you can check in the description below. Hexagram line structure. Awareness is something that is of enormous importance to all of us. We are going into a very deep level into the nature of the lines. First we have to come to grips with the nature of the hexagram and how it operates. A hexagram is made up of two trigrams, a lower and an upper trigram which is made up of 3 lines each. They have a distinct relationship to each other. The first line, which is the base of the lower trigram, the ground floor of the base trigram, has a similar relationship to the fourth line which is the baseline of the upper trigram. There is consistent relationship between the lower and the upper trigram, but their functions are different and the nature of their wave and frequency is different. Human design is a logical process which is rooted in the capacity for things to be organized. We do not live in an organized world, that is, we have a structure of patterns that we overlay over the subjective chaos at different areas, beginning at the most mundane level with our relationships, whether they are personal or transpersonal. The nature of human design and the information that we will share with you in terms of how the lines work. When we look at the emotional system, we look at the nature of the waves, and we see that in the emotional system there are 6 different waves which are generated by the 6th gate being the motor gate of the solarplex system. Out of that gate come the different waves, different gears in the emotional system. There is a parallel to this on the other side. You should keep in mind when we go through this process of looking through the awareness frequencies from the 1st to the 6th, that they are in resonance and harmony with the 6 emotional waves. In other words, the first emotional wave and the first awareness frequency belong to each other. Third lines. We have seen the foundation, the introspection, we have seen that you get to the first floor and have your windows and you immediately have projection, and then you get to the ceiling of this first floor, you get to the end of the trigram. A trigram in itself is complete. By the time you go from the first to the third line you are at the end of a process. It is the completion of that process. The third line is both the first and the second line together, at another level. This is about adaptation. This is the keynote to this line. The capacity to be able to adapt. There is a level of introspection and projection in that. The two of them together allow for the foundation to be established and refined until through projection, they see that adaptation is necessary. In order to meet the other side of a channel, the first step is the ability to adapt. What that tells you is that first and second lines have difficulties in relationships, because the first line wants to be introspective and the second line just wants to project. Only the third line begins the process of saying, aha. Not only is there a gate at the other end of the channel, but that gate will affect me. I can't just be the prima donna. Where am I going to get my energy at the other end? There is something at work here in which I will have to adapt to the forces at the other side. This is the beginning of the adaptation process. Here we have a transition from the first 2 lines, which are instinctive and tribal by nature, to the individual awareness frequency. We come to the keynote of intuition, and here in the third line, we have the intuition for partnership or dependency. The third line wave of the emotions is bonds made and broken. This is not stable. Third lines are not stable. They can get into things and get out. They adapt. Adaptation in and of itself is all about having an intuition for who can be the partner, or who is going to be dependent. What kind of adaptability will have to take place? Hexagram 41. Keyword, decrease. Theme, contraction. Center, root. The pressure centers are of enormous importance, like all things. We are basically a sandwich. You have a pressure above and a pressure below, and everything else is just squashed in the middle. Those pressures rule the nature of the world that we live in. They fuel all of the basic potentials of what it is to be in a body, of what it is to live out the consciousness of being a human being. They are essential and they are always present. When I say they are always present, that is not a matter of whether you have them personally in your design, or not. As long as it is in the world, it is a part of the aura of the world and everybody gets in contact with it. So in looking at these pressure centers, please understand that we are looking at the fundamental root of all human processes. In that, the fundamental source of pressure is necessary to initiate all of these processes. The 41st hexagram is the fuel or the pressure of an abstract stream in the sensing circuit, the stream of feeling. This stream is a uniquely human stream. It is the evolutionary and genetic material necessary for us to experience incarnation in a human form. Without this stream, the human evolutionary process would not exist. Not only are we speaking here of a fundamental pressure for our life process, but in particular, to understand it is not shared with any other form of life. This is a very specific pressure and a very specific stream that is directly associated with what we experience as being human. The 41st hexagram, as a codon in our genetic code, is the only initiating codon. In other words, it is an initiating codon in the sense that it is at the beginning in the genetic structure of everything. Thus, in beginning with the 41st hexagram, with the most important pressure in our evolutionary process now and ever since we became Homo sapiens, or modern humans. The 41st hexagram is the trigger that brought us into the stage that we are in, and we are still going towards completion. What is unique for us as human beings is the capacity to be able to feel. This capacity leads to the desire for experience. The desire for experience to be able to feel and manifest that feeling is the human evolutionary process. It is what drives us from one experience to the next, until we develop through that process. It also brings into play the nature of crisis. In other words, it tells us very clearly that the evolutionary process is rooted in crisis, change and transitoriness. The 41st gate, decrease, is the gate of contraction and it says, the fuel in which there is the energy to feel, or not. So the whole capacity to feel, the complete potential that exists in our genetic spectrum, is rooted in the 41. In our work in looking at sexuality in human design, the 41 is the gate of fantasy, the capacity to be able to fantasize the feeling itself because all the feelings lie there. The old Chinese image of the 41 hexagram was the gardener who would cut back the garden in the winter time or fall, to prepare it for the following season. By cutting it back, nothing was lost, because all the potential of that plant, everything that plant could possibly be, every twig, every leaf and every flower was already there within it, contracted inside, held inside as a potential. So the 41st gate carries with it this enormous potential for any kind of experience. This is the key to what it is to be human. Its mechanic is that it is always about hunger. A human being is so different from its animal kin. They only have one kind of hunger, basic, predatory hunger to stay alive. But human beings have a duality in that. We have the material hunger, the hunger for survival, but we also have this other hunger, the deeper one, the human hunger for experience. To go to Mars and see what the rocks look like. What for? Just to see what the rocks are. To discover America. What for? Just to see what is there on the other side. So the first thing to recognize is that the basic fuel, the fundamental fuel for the evolutionary process, is the hunger to feel. The whole key to being an abstract being, whatever kind of abstract definition you have, is that the essential understanding about life is rooted in something very simple. One step after the other, don't repeat your steps. So look at what that really is saying, like the 64th gate in the Ina, because there is so much potential information. Built into these gates is a mechanism that is ready to release only one at a time. In other words, all those feelings are built up within the nature of the 41 as a resource. But if you look above the lines in the white book, it says, the limitation of resources which maximizes development of potential. If you have all these fantasies running around inside of you, it will diminish your potential. If you focus your energy, the name of this channel, on one fantasy, on one feeling, then you can move through that. And when it is over, you can go on to the next one. This is the key to the abstract process. This maximization of that potential by recognizing that this resource is always there. You don't have to have all the fantasies all the time, you can have one at a time and go through what is the correct evolutionary process. Remember, When you are looking at a hexagram, the first line is always going to represent not simply the foundation of the hexagram, but its essential truth. Gate 41 line 3, efficiency. One of the dilemmas of the collective process is that somebody always starts it. So in that essence there is always an individual, a single being, that starts to change events. When you are looking at the whole evolutionary process here, you will see in the dualities of the lines, that the exalted tend to point towards doing things by myself, whereas the detriment says, no, we have to involve everybody else. The third line is classic of this. Remember, that the third line is completing a process. It has qualities of the first and second line. It has completed the process in the sense that it is within itself ready to experiment, shall we say. The third line is about trial and error, bonds made and broken. It is about this learning process which is called efficiency here. In times of decrease, selfishness is justified. In that moment of your feeling, what it is saying is, release your energy into that feeling and you will discover whether that is a mistake or not. Wait and see. But release all of your energy into that feeling. That is efficient. Remember, that the adrenaline system, if it is defined in somebody, must be used. This energy must be worked. It is absolutely essential. When that energy is being used properly, that is what efficiency is all about. Because it is a third line, it means that you are not instantly efficient. It means that you have to learn how to be efficient, when to release energy into a fantasy, when to release energy into a feeling. This is not about an awareness that tells you when. It is about a process that, if you don't do it right, it does not work, and you learn from that experience and you try to do it differently the next time, as a result of that learning experience. Saturn exalted, material ambition and the discipline to go at it alone, and the energy that fuels the feeling for personal ambition. Very much orientate towards someone's rather than the collective's experience. I will see how that mushroom tastes like. That is my fantasy. I want to feel what that is like. I want to have that experience. If the person drops dead after eating the mushroom, nobody else will do it. But if that person has a wonderful trip and sees God and they tell their collective friends, hey, I just saw God. All you have to do is to eat one of these, then it can become a collective experience, a collective feeling. What this line is saying is that efficiency is to put your energy into your feeling and your fantasy. When you come to the other side, you have the moon in detriment. Instinctive assistance, admirable, but in this position misguided, where two will use up resources more than twice as fast as one. Now, the energy that fuels the feeling to share. This feeling that one has to share. It is a detriment. This whole stream is about the human experience, and though each of these early lines are geared towards making sure that the evolutionary process goes on, somebody has to take the first step to go across the mountain. There is going to be this force underneath that says, yes, but I have to take somebody with me in order to share the experience with me, because otherwise we do not have a humanity. We just have a kind of a bizarre species, but we don't have what will become a strictly human phenomena, something that we call culture. No culture, no civilization until we share our experiences. This concludes the description of Gate 41, Line 3, Efficiency. Stay tuned for more human design content from HD Morf.